It's hard to say anything bad about turtles. So who am I? As the introduction said, I'm Matt Cross. I'm a conservation biologist at the Toledo Zoo. I've been doing this most of my life. My dad caught me a garter snake when I was 3, and we played around with it. And my mom has said, it's been a downward spiral ever since. I work for the Toledo Zoo. I've been doing this conservation work since 2005 with my master's, and I definitely more of a spatial biologist and a smattering of population biology. When we talk about turtles, really, we start with reptiles, and as a group, reptiles are one of the most threatened vertebrate taxa in the world. There have been a lot of papers documenting these continued downward spirals in reptile and amphibian populations, especially reptiles, and it's been gaining more and more steam as years progress. Turtles, especially, are probably one of the most threatened of the reptile groups. This comes for a lot of reasons, but it's pretty well recognized that turtles and tortoises, as this title says, are in trouble. People have known about this for years, and you can see here this map kind of shows you some hot spots around the world of where we have threatened species. You can see over here definitely in the Asian area, Africa, South America. But surprising, not surprising, over here in our little section of the Midwest, we're not completely out of the woods when it comes to number of threatened turtle species in our area. So why are turtles threatened? I'll cover threats here in a hot second, but really, turtles they have a suite of life history traits that make them very susceptible to adult mortality. So the adults being killed or eaten or harvested, and it's just kind of a recipe for disaster when it comes to a species like this. They're very long-lived. They need to be long-lived. So here is an article from the University of Michigan Biological Station of a recorded landing turtle. It's 83, and we estimate they live well beyond 100. They have delayed sexual maturity, so turtles don't even start reproducing until they're most turtles don't even start reproducing until they're at least 10 years old. It's a pretty common trait. There's a few of them that don't follow that rule, but for the most part, that's what we see. We expect them to have high juvenile mortality, so a lot of the young get eaten. They really just need one to replace themselves, but they pretty much have to live long enough to replace themselves. Low recruitment, so we don't see a lot of them surviving beyond the egg stage and that juvenile stage. So most of the nests are destroyed within about half of them in the first 24 hours from mesopredators. And in general, turtles require high adult survivorship. So when we look at survivorship of adult turtles in box turtles, Blanding's turtles, a lot of these populations, it approaches 100%. Close like 99.999. The adults, if they're left alone, they will survive it to they need, and we don't see that a lot. So again, this is a suite of characteristics that makes them very vulnerable and difficult to study short term. There's a reason you see most of the old turtle, or most of the turtle researchers are older gentlemen, because they've been doing this in their entire life and they still have questions. So here, this kind of just shows, if we're talking about turtles reproducing and these populations, how a turtle differs from a species, from some more familiar species, because I think we have a hard time visualizing this concept of delayed sexual maturity. So if we look here, looking at a snapping turtle, a black bear, moose, and white-tailed deer over 17 years, you can see that the mammalian species have reproduced in not quite exponential numbers, but very large numbers compared to the snapping turtle, who just for the first time at age 17, laid its first eggs. Now, we know from the previous slide that 84% of nests are destroyed in the first 72 hours. There's high, so there are many years where those nests you don't have any of them survive. And this kind of reiterates this with alligator snapping turtles, where these X's are an instance where you have harvest or mesopredators eating the nests or something that destroys the nests. Eventually you won't have any turtles, but the interesting thing about turtles is you won't see it for decades, because they'll keep on returning to the same place year after year. Adult turtles can persist as what are called ghost populations, where you just see the adult turtles, you know. So you go out there, you see turtles on a log, you say, okay, well, I saw 7 Blanding's turtles today. They must be doing fine. But if they're not reproducing, it's a problem. And they can, if they live more than 100 years, it's definitely an issue. So threats for turtles are very similar to a lot of other species. We have, you know, habitat loss and fragmentation, pollution, predation. Again, raccoons are probably one of the #1 nest predator. You know, but also skunks, possums, foxes, dogs. Road mortality is a big one. So our female turtles are the ones that are moving around a lot, and they usually make long distance movements to find their historic nesting sites. They generally go back to the same place year after year, and this is when they encounter cars, and very often they get hit. And so this can definitely have a huge impact on these, especially low populations, when you start getting your reproductive females that are wiped out annually because of road mortality. Commercial harvesting and poaching is one that is we're becoming increasingly aware of, where turtle populations have been decimated because of poaching, predominantly for the Asian markets, but also local. And disease is another one that is just starting to emerge. There's been some new diseases on the forefront here that have started impacting turtles. Another one, changing climate, whether it's doing it on its own or caused by us, regardless, things are changing and might be changing. And so when we start planning reserves and areas to protect for turtles, that habitat might not exist in the future. And so these changing distributions are kind of a big question mark for everyone. And sorry, I almost missed logging in here because I just dug this up today. This was hot off the presses. There was a man in Kentucky who was arrested for selling turtles illegally to the Chinese market in China. Estimated that he had about 599 box turtles, so a local species we're all familiar with. And in, you know, about a year, he made about $62,000 selling buckets full of box turtles. Later on in the article, they talk about, you know, someone saw him at a auto shop, and he had hundreds. They had estimated he had hundreds of turtles in his car in Rubbermaids. And so it is very real. I think we think that these are more the illegal pet trade is more those exotic tortoises you see in, like, in Madagascar, the star tortoises, sea turtles and that kind of thing. But our local species are definitely high up there on the list. I've seen pictures from law enforcement officers of people with wheelbarrows full of box turtles. So they're definitely at risk of poaching, and it's one that's really hard to get our hands on. So to help out with this, the Toledo Zoo, we have our local turtle initiative, and mostly our focal species are the spotted turtle, the box turtle, and the Blanding's turtle. These are some of our very charismatic local species. The box turtles are usually our only truly terrestrial turtle. They're found in our uplands, whereas the Blandings and spotted turtles can be found in these wet areas like prairies and wetlands. So the Blanding's turtles are state threatened. Spotted turtles are state endangered. And all three of these are species of greatest conservation need. Eastern box turtles are, I believe, species of concern in Ohio. So these are the 3 species we mainly focus on. But we also, while we're surveying for these, we interact with you know, painted turtles, snapping turtles, stinkpots. So we have a really great program with this. Turtles are a great ambassador for a lot of these wildlife issues, water quality, talking about these long-lived organisms, great for, you know, things like our elephants or even our sturgeon, where they have a lot of the same life history traits. And people love turtles. It's really hard to find someone who doesn't love turtles. I've only met one person who said he hated turtles, and I really regret not asking him why. So when we start talking about turtles here locally or in general, one of the very basic questions we try to answer is, where are they? And we have a lot of habitat here in Ohio, and despite all the fragmentation we have, and it ranges from, you know, these ephemeral wetland or these vernal pools to our very pristine Lake Erie marshes. So when we're looking for turtles, when we find where they are and we're trying to assess populations, it usually requires a lot more work than I think we anticipate. So when someone takes a picture of a single turtle, you know, what does this tell us? And kind of what I alluded to earlier is it doesn't tell us a whole lot because they can live so long. Again, there are these they can exist as ghost populations that are functionally extinct. And in the case of these very long-lived species like blandings turtles, more than 80 years. So when we see a bunch of turtles sitting on a log and we want to know what's the population status, this doesn't tell us a whole lot. Like I said, we can say, oh, there's 5 painted turtles in this picture, assuming I counted correctly, but they're all adults. The only way that this really is good news is if we see a little turtle swimming by, and we can say, okay, well, at least in the last decade or so, they've been reproducing. So that's good news, but we still want to try to get our fingers on the pulse of, you know, how well they're doing and get those details so we can monitor their populations. So we go about this a couple different ways. We can survey our aquatic turtles. We do this using a combination of different aquatic traps. So in this picture, we see a large hoop trap. The picture in the lower right-hand corner here is kind of our experimental, our study design setup for how we survey wetlands, where we have an area delineated and we've got trap locations, we've got areas where we do visual surveys, and then we bait them with a variety of, we lure them with a variety of baits. These are live traps, so the turtles are all released. And this is my technician's least favorite thing to do is fill our bait jars with fish and fish oil, but it really brings the turtles in. We also survey terrestrial turtles. Oh, hold on, my thing isn't working. Huh, there we go. So if you look at these two pictures on the left, I promise you there are box turtles in here. This one right here, you can just kind of see the shell poking out. This one right here, I had to look in this one the other day. I think there's a nose in here someplace. I remember I took this picture for a reason. I promise you there's a box turtle in this picture, but after all these years, I have trouble finding it. And so when we're out looking for box turtles, very often this is what you would see. They hunker down in the leaves. They're out mostly early in the spring, but they're very hard to find at times. And so in the past, we've used visual surveys. What's really great are using these wildlife detection dogs with John Rucker and his Boykin Spaniels. We've done this in metro parks a couple times, and this is an amazing opportunity to further our mission and get volunteers and staff and our camps involved out in turtle conservation. Because when I say, hey, does anyone want to come volunteer with me to find turtles, I usually get a few takers. But when I say, does anyone want to come watch dogs find turtles for us, we've got people knocking down the door. Oh, what happened there? So when we'll go to the dogs, it's pretty fun. It's organized chaos, you know, chasing the dogs around while they sniff out turtle trails. One of the caveats is they have to be able to find a turtle that has moved recently. So weather has not always been our friend, but it's a pretty great time. Get the dogs out there, run around, get people involved with them, and eventually they find turtles for us. And it's pretty cool, very rewarding. A lot of people love this, and it's a really good way to engage people and survey these turtle populations. So we're going to kind of talk about our turtle surveys and what we've been doing here at the zoo. Like I said, we've got a number of species we work with, but most of our focus today is going to be the blandings turtle. We've been doing blandings turtle research at the Toledo Zoo for about 15 years, surveying some of our local areas. And we kind of wanted to up our game, because if we look here at the regional status, a lot of other states have done status assessments for blandings turtles, but Michigan and Ohio kind of lag behind. The blandings turtles that have been petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act, and the decision should be made in 2023. So there's kind of a sense of urgency here in recent years to be able to contribute to these status assessments. Only up until recently, only 1 to 2 populations have been studied long-term or even assessed, and there's kind of some holdouts here in the area, and some knowledge gaps. So we look at this comes from Wynn and Moody, 2006. This is an OBS publication where we have the gray areas are former counties where they were found. The black dots are where we suspect or we know they are. And we even know that this isn't entirely accurate because we found turtles elsewhere. So really filling in these data gaps was kind of a goal with this project. I do some field work every now and again, but these are the technicians. These are the ones who are mostly out there doing the trapping, doing the hard work. They have a pretty good time, but they're definitely the ones that deserve all the credit for what I'm going to talk about today. Our main project here with the Blandings turtles, we have a few different objectives, but the main one I'm going to focus on today is just our monitoring strategy and trying to find the turtles and getting our population estimates. We followed a cookbook recipe from a group that did this in the Northeast. They set up these rapid and long-term assessment surveys to get at relative abundance and population estimates. And so we just kind of took what they did and applied it to Northern Ohio. We surveyed a lot of different wetland types and areas. We were all over the northern part of the state. Again, it runs the gamut from these large semi-natural Lake Erie marshes to these vernal or ephemeral pools in these forests, canals, ditches, bogs. We were all over the place. So in 2019, and I got an update here. I forgot about that. We were able to survey 37 sites in Ohio. We put in about 10,000 trap nights, and we caught 217 unique Blandings turtles. And what that gives us is kind of an estimate of how hard it is to find a Blandings turtle. The most common is Blandings turtles per trap night, but that gives you this really low, hard to interpret number. I prefer to do trap nights for Blandings turtle, which gives you an idea of how long you had, how much effort you had to put in an area to catch a Blandings turtle. And on average, it took us about 46.5 trap nights in Ohio to find a Blandings turtle. And that varied dramatically by site. But we can start to compare to Michigan, who had to put relatively low effort in to find Blandings turtles. And when we compare this to the Northeast Blandings turtle working group that did the initial work, we can kind of see that it's starting to make more comparisons. We put in a pretty impressive number of hours in our first year compared to the other project over 2 years. And something else to keep in mind is this was for 5 states. So if we, backwards. So if we look at our compiled data over 3 years, we kind of took a break there in 2020. We kept on going a little bit compared to other states. We can start to look at our trap nights per Blandings turtle and see that, yeah, we are definitely up there toward the higher end. We were able to survey a lot of sites in Ohio. We put in a lot of trap nights, a lot of effort. And so we can start to draw some conclusions by comparing to other states and these data. Again, the trap nights per Blandings turtle definitely vary, because I'm sure there's many of you have been to some of these Lake Erie wetlands, and especially during birding, and have sent images. So we know there are some places that are easy to find. So if we look here, here's our estimated number of trap nights to catch a Blandings turtle, and this definitely varies by site. So there we've got our main hotspot, where it takes us about 2 nights of effort to catch a Blandings turtle, compared to other areas like we have here at OSU, where it took them close to 250 trap nights to catch a Blandings turtle. And so we can see, Ohio over here on the left and Michigan on the right. And again, these data really help us start to draw some of these conclusions that we can use to make management recommendations for the species. There's also some seasonality in the captures, so we definitely tend to get more species in May, and then it kind of dips off. Usually around the end of July, my technicians are pretty bored because we're not catching much. Another one we want to look at are the sex ratios at the site, and we can see here at some of these places it's pretty evenly split, 50-50, but a lot of other sites it's either skewed towards males or one way or the other. Another important one we look at is the age structure. So this is pretty much, it's really hard to tell the age of a turtle. So some people will say with like box turtles and some of the other turtles, you can count the number of rings on the shell, and that's not super accurate. So we just break them up into size classes, and those younger size classes are what we're looking for, because it shows us that there's been some reproduction in the last decade or so. And so here, I had to kind of truncate this, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see this. We really have very few of these these smaller age classes, which is expected. We definitely expect it to be more adult skewed because the young are just so insanely hard to find of any species or any turtle species. So these areas where we get that, that's really good news and it's something to be excited about. The areas where we don't see it, again, they're hard to find, but it can also kind of tell us, you know, maybe these are some areas that could use a little bit of help through some augmentation and head starting. So when we're looking for Blanding's turtles, spotted turtles, we're taking data on a lot of other species. So these are, oh, I forgot my legend. Oh, anyway, these are our data for snapping turtles. This compares the carapace length to the mass. And we looked at this because snapping turtles are unique in our state as they're one of the two of the harvestable species. And so we've always had a great deal of curiosity as to how sustainable the snapping turtle harvest is. And so the red line is our current harvesting size of about 11 inches. And that protects about 61% of the females in our population or from our captures. If we were to up that to 12 inches, we protect 80% of the reproductive females. So, you know, we can start looking at the data we've collected and make recommendations for other species. And then another fun one is the purple line here is the maximum straight carapace length that Roger Conant found in his Reptiles of Ohio 1951 publication. And we definitely found some bigger turtles than Conant did. Another example here is the other data we collect and how we can use this. This is a population. These are population estimates from of painted turtles from Wiregrass Lake. You can see we started this in 2006, and it's been a while since I've updated this, mostly just because I use it to illustrate a point. We can see there's a lot, you know, depending on effort and year, these population estimates fluctuate. And so one of the real values we have as the zoo is kind of our longevity to be able to do these long-term studies. So I was a grad student for a very long time, so I'm going to pick on grad students here for a hot second. You know, if I'm a grad student and I'm conducting a project, most places you have 2 years, which means you get one field season. So if I'm surveying from 2009 to 2010, I might think, hey, you know what? Turtles, they're on an exponential increase. They're doing great. Let's go home, have a beer. We don't need to do anything where, you know, we save the turtles. A year later, if we did this, we'd say, holy cow, the turtle population's crashing. Let's plot all the stops. We need to save the painted turtles here. Let's dump all of our conservation money into painted turtles. And so we need these long-term data sets so we can see these trends. So if we start to see these troughs, we can say, well, let's take a step back here, maybe wait a couple years and reevaluate so we don't, you know, so we can make smart decisions about how we allocate our conservation resources. Another fun side project we have with box turtles is kind of this DIY making our own GPS logger thing. My colleague and I, unfortunately, he couldn't drive up from Georgia, so I found a stand-in for him. We tested these homemade GPS loggers on box turtles, and you can see over here, the green line is me tracking the turtle in person, and the blue line is with a GPS logger. So with these GPS loggers, we get a lot more data. However, they typically tend to be expensive, and upward anywhere from $400 to $2,000 per unit. So we actually run workshops that teach people how to make these, mostly targeting grad students because we were both grad students at one point in time, and these actually cost about $50 to make a piece. And the turtles have been a really great test subject for this, and it's been a lot of fun. Another one we do is citizen science, and this is a huge kick of mine. I love the citizen science part of my job. I started handing out this. Maybe some of you have seen it. This is a flyer requesting Blanding's turtle sightings, and I was really trying to target the biggest week in birding. Cause I don't know what the birders know. I mean, I got a lot of sightings from birders out in McGee Marsh during the biggest week in birding, or a lot of these other, these wetlands, and the power of citizen science and people calling in can't be overstated. So when we start talking about the research we're doing, right here for the proposed research plan that we used, you're talking about 100 field days of work, And that adds up. It's a lot of personnel time, a lot of staff time, and that might not always be available. And then, as HR tells me, I have to pay people, and the price tags for a lot of these projects, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so, when I was in grad school, I started with box turtles. They made a really great test subject for citizen science using pattern recognition software, like you would for fingerprints, to identify, box turtles. And box turtles are awesome because they've got patterns on the carapace and the plastron, and they generally don't change a whole lot over time. So we were able to get a publication out of this and use this as a kind of a test run. And this was our stepping stone for eventually doing this with Blanding's turtles. So this is Terry Braymeyer. He's one of our citizen scientists. He's our lead citizen scientist. And he came to a talk much like this one in 2014. It was right when that paper was hot off the presses, and he said, "I see Blanding's turtles in my backyard. What can I do to help?" So, first I was like, "Well, sure, you see Blanding's turtles." It turns out I did. He had pictures, and so we worked with him, and he started organizing his community, and he holds these kind of like town halls to get people on board with collecting the pictures. And Terry is very much part of our team. He's let us, store our trapping stuff at his place. We eat lunch there. We're out trapping, and we've done some really cool stuff. A lot of it thanks to Terry. So Blanding's turtles, as many of you have seen, the adults have kind of a lightly patterned carapace, but it's very worn down. That plastron, the bottom part of the shell, we figured was unique enough that we could try the fingerprint or the photo recognition with it. And there are 3 rules for photo recognition, kind of like the 3 rules for your mogwai, and you have to be able to photograph them. The patterns are unique and they don't change over time. And for Blanding's turtles, we believe we talked to some experts and we believe that we hit this mark. So we used pattern recognition software that called Hotspotter, which essentially is the same as your fingerprint recognition stuff that you would use, that the police would use. And what it does is it finds little points and marks on the shell and compares it to all the pictures in the database. And you can have these little query sites. It works out really well. It's very user friendly. And so over I think the first 5 years of Terry taking pictures, we got about 116 photos of 51 individual adult female Blanding's turtles. So they would find them while the turtles were nesting. So we used some mark recapture analysis to estimate the population, and we came up with about 87 females. And generally sex ratios are 1-to-1, if not 1-to-4. So this would put our population at around 170 in that ballpark, and that's pretty impressive. These are as Terry worked out there, there are more. They slowly got more and more call-ins from other people in the area sending in their Blanding's turtle sightings, and so this population estimate of 84 is it's pretty incredible. A lot of my colleagues are jealous because they're like, "Oh man, we caught like 20 Blanding's turtles this year." What's really cool here is this is an estimate from 2010, it's dated. This is based on expert opinion, and this is number of extant populations in the state with an estimated population size of less than 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 100, etc. And at the time in Ohio, we only knew of 3 populations, 2 of which we thought had less than 25. So being able to find that many turtles at a site with citizen science is pretty awesome. Like that's huge. Again, I cannot overstate the importance of that. And we were able to follow up with this with some of our surveys. So we went there and trapped 240 trap nights is us trapping for from Monday through Friday. So that gets us 4 consecutive trap nights, and we caught 65. The parentheses are recaptures. In 1 week, we caught 65 Blanding's turtles doing trapping. And keep in mind that 87 or the 57 that Terry found, the individuals were just from photographs. The 87 was an estimate. So we found 68 from all age classes in our first week of trapping. Then in 2019, Terry and the citizen scientists hit it again. They found 44 right after we had caught 65, and only 2 of them had been notched from our first round of trapping. So right there, we have 107 turtles. That's more than anyone ever expected. Second round of trapping after nesting, we caught 14 new ones, but a total of 20. And then by the third round, we were down to much fewer in terms of numbers, but a lot of recaptures. We marked a lot of them. But this is absolutely incredible, again, in terms of the number of turtles we found at this site. And we actually just had a publication come out where we discussed using the photographic mark recapture and citizen science to come up with preliminary estimates for this. And Terry was one of our co-authors. So this was a really cool project. I'm very proud to have been associated with this. This was insanely awesome. So all this data we collect, again, when we do it, we come with population estimates. It's really cool. Boots on the ground is what we really need, this implementation side of things. So like I showed you that in that figure, there are some areas where, in certain areas that don't have recruitment, we don't see these young turtles, even despite, some of these sites we've documented over 10, 15 years, a decline. We've never seen young. We went from catching 20 turtles to 1, and that's maybe we find 1 like every 7 years. And so we initiated the head starting program where we would capture females from these areas that had robust populations, bring them into the lab, induce oviposition or egg laying, incubate the eggs, and hatch them. We raised them for about a year before we released them back into Ohio wetlands in 2020, or this year was our first year of putting them back. So they went to 2 wetlands in Ohio, and some of them went to, I guess, 3 wetlands in Ohio, because we put a proportion of them back where we collected them from, because we don't want to be part of the problem. And then a portion of them went to Pennsylvania to help one of their populations. So this was an insanely successful project. One of my favorite parts here is in that lower right-hand corner. That's our sturgeon rearing facility. So the sturgeon are only in the trailer from June till October. And one of the big limiting factors for places rearing turtles is the space. I think a lot of space. And so we have this perfect setup where I can put the hatchling turtles in here. And we had 75 in 2019, and that only took up 3 tanks. So yeah, if we ever wanted to start doing this en masse for multiple species, we could really just push out the turtles. Another important part of implementation before we start putting turtles back and translocating, all this kind of fun stuff, is restoring habitat. And this was a really great project with Metro Parks where they had some money to restore a wetland. And so they had a bulldozer, and we got to go out there and guide them. So they regraded some slopes, put some structure out in the wetland, made some deep pools. One of the big limiting factors in the Oak Openings region especially are these areas that have consistent water sources. So a lot of the water in the Oak Openings are vernal pools that are great for them in the spring, but they dry up. And then our telemetry data has shown us that the turtles then kind of start to leapfrog or bounce around to other other ponds in the area, and that's when they cross roads, and that's when we see that adult mortality that we know is a problem. This was a great project, and we look forward to getting our traps out there here in the next year to survey after about a year later, to give things time to come down so we can see how things are using it, because we did catch turtles prior in this pond. We had Blanding's turtles there, but we did some pretty cool renovations. Turtles are great because they make a great education and outreach animal. So during our journeys or our research, we always have people bumping into us asking, how are things going? What are you guys doing? What are you up to? And it's given us a great opportunity to talk to the public. So our staff are always engaging the public, explain to people the importance of turtles. Box turtles make a great ambassador animal. Everybody loves box turtles. They're one of the turtles that most everyone has a story about. They had the box turtle that came to their house every year, which is probably true. And we can start talking about some of these. I don't know what's going on here with my computer. I think I must have had a timing thing. But again, and we run our summer camps out there. We also talk a lot with the public, and this gives us a great opportunity to educate people and get people involved. And if people are looking for a way to get involved, the easiest thing to do is to grab a camera. So the Toledo Zoo, Ohio Partners in Reptile and Amphibians, and Herp Mapper are great places that where you can submit your sightings. You can also do iNaturalist. There's been a lot of work to discussing the pros and cons of iNaturalist versus things like HerpMapper, especially for threatened turtle species. So I tend to lean more towards HerpMapper, but any way you can get your sightings into the hands of the researchers, because as we've seen with Terry, people, citizen scientists, community scientists, people just finding these things can end up having a really huge impact, and it just takes a little bit of time to submit these sightings. So with that, a little bit early, but I need to thank all the people who have helped out with this over the years, especially my little helpers, are my funding sources, our partners in this program. Terry, Larry A. Finch, he makes us our trap tags for free. It's pretty, I love it.